Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of The New Frontier. Only joined by Joe this time, but we wanted to kind of bring some breaking news in the world of AI, which is SearchGPT. So, Joe, how are you?
I am good. I'm excited. I have been geeking about SearchGPT quite a lot over the last few days. How are you doing?
I'm good. So yeah, let's crack straight into it, Joe. So, what is SearchGPT?
Right, so this is pretty exciting. SearchGPT is, in essence, the Google version of ChatGPT. So ChatGPT rolled out, I think, like a few months ago, already a closed beta of their search function, which is basically integrated within the normal environment of ChatGPT. And now on the 31st, they rolled it out widely for all of their Plus subscribers. So if you are still on the free version, you're probably not going to see that. But if you are a Plus subscriber, already in the sort of the normal chat, you see a little kind of like planet at the sort of bottom corner of your chat. And when you click on that, you can enable Search GPT. And what is really cool is that actually, when I was started testing it, sometimes it switches it on automatically based off the query. So you don't even have to always know exactly when you want to use Search GPT. It sometimes just switches on based on the data that you want to search for. So it's like ChatGPT on steroids with Google. So Google beware.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is, as we put this together and people commented on our LinkedIn and on our WhatsApp, how is this different from Perplexity? Is this better than Perplexity? And I'll let you answer this, but in my opinion, right now at least the answer is no. It's not better than Perplexity. Perplexity have been on the market for maybe a year. We're unofficially sponsored by Perplexity on this podcast. We love it, and it's. I think it's interesting that kind of other people in our AI bubble, kind of immediately kind of compared to Perplexity and are going, "Oh, this is not as good." But I think what people have to remember is ChatGPT, for many people who are not thinking about AI daily, as the audience of this podcast probably is the default for everything AI. They probably aren't using Claude. ChatGPT is the 11th most visited website in the world. They have 200 million active users. They have 77 million active users in the US. And if you think that Perplexity, which the CEO recently came out and said gets 100 million queries a week, it's obviously a large and fast-growing search engine. ChatGPT, Perplexity is ranked not in the top 700 of global websites. So ChatGPT, in my opinion, is going to come in. It's going to completely blow Perplexity, sadly, out the water. Not maybe in terms of quality, but it's just the eyeballs thing. It's like that kind of graph I've seen of Microsoft Teams users versus Slack, and Slack starts strong and it's a great program, and people start using it, and then suddenly Microsoft's like, okay, we're launching Teams now, and it's just like all the way up
Yeah,
to
but you know what? This is the thing. Like, actually, let's sit at this example for a second, because yes, Microsoft Teams is widely used, but for the more savvy people, Slack is still very much the solution. Like, if you compare the ability of, like, basically the whole user experience of Teams versus Slack, it's completely different. So I think in a similar way, I think there will be probably space for both. That's kind of my bold prediction.
yeah. No, I agree there's going to be space for both. I think, like, kind of just doing some high level research preparing for this, if you look at search in the 2000s, there's kind of like 8 or 9 players who are doing search. There's Yahoo, there's Google was one of the newcomers, there's a bunch of other people. Actually, I forget their names now, which is kind of just showing how this goes. But
The nice research you've done.
well, there's like 8 or 9 people, and it was like a YouTube video I was watching of how like the search changed, and basically Google enters a race, and they go from having half the number of users of Yahoo in 2000 to 10x the number of users they have them 8 or 9 years later. So the kind of adoption for Google is absolutely rapid. It eats up Yahoo. It becomes the dominant, like 90% of search, and you have like the kind of early fragmentation of the 2000s kind of disappear into one. I agree with you. I think as Roger in the chat is saying, I think there is like Perplexity is probably going to be there for those of us who are really nerdy about AI and love this kind of stuff. But I would forecast that for the average Joe, ChatGPT with search is going to become one of the. You're not the average Joe, but
no, I'm not actually. I am the AI Joe.
Exactly. The non-AI average Joe,
Yes.
I think SearchGPT is going to become like the new default LLM-based search.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing. It's really interesting what like actually how the search space is going to change, because when Perplexity came out, it was kind of quite niche. Like, even now when I talk to audiences that are tech savvy and I mention Perplexity, they're like, oh, wow, what is this? What is the name of this tool? So it's not so widely available, but pretty much most people have heard about ChatGPT. And as such, and they actually, ChatGPT is going to roll out the search functions or SearchGPT fairly soon. I think the plan is by the end of the year for that to be in all accounts, not just the plus accounts, but also the free accounts. And so what that means is that, when Perplexity was out, we all got excited. This is a completely new way to find information. Awesome, but very niche. Now we have a tool that is going to be widely available to anyone on the internet. And it will have this great function of searching for products and information in a completely new way. Now it's interesting how that will change completely the consumer behavior towards search. And now Google is really in trouble. And I think this is definitely something people don't necessarily realize, like how much this is shifting. I think like a few weeks ago, I posted in the AI for e-commerce newsletter a statistic, which is for the first time in ever, Google is actually dropping in terms of their search market share, basically under 50%. They were always kind of having this monopoly on sort of like web searches. And now with Perplexity, but more significantly with SearchGPT, like that will completely change. And it will basically, I think it will completely shift how brands are discovered online, how we discover products, how we consume information, how we search for things. I think it's so significant. I don't think people necessarily realize what a big deal SearchGPT is, not because it's so innovative or is so different than something like Perplexity, but it's because it's going to be so widely adopted, and it's such a different experience in terms of data, like receiving of data and consuming of data, that will have a profound effect on anything to do online, really.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think the time we are now, if you are a brand, this is a time similar to I was talking about in the 2000s, where certain companies saw what was happening on Google, had a very sharp Google strategy, and came to completely dominate. And those I'm talking about, Amazon is one of those good examples of how they kind of used what works best on kind of a non-large large language model search, on like stack ranking search. They had hundreds of product pages. They had very good technical SEO. Another one is gosh, I forget their name now. What's the travel site called that everyone uses?
Well, now we're having both a brain fart.
TripAdvisor. So
TripAdvisor.
Again, TripAdvisor, is a classic case. They're now like a plus $4 billion company, but they kind of got ahead of all of their competitors through an emphasis on SEO. And like, if you listen to podcasts, as I have, from their kind of like founders and early team members, that was their strategy: rank well on SEO, rank well on Google, drive lots of traffic. It's a free service, but you can advertise on, you can generate advertising revenue. So I think we're at that stage now, for kind of getting ahead on large language model searches for brands. And I guess we can start talking about a way to optimize, but we'll shout out e-content and Amazing Wave, I guess. Like, if you want to, talk about this for your business, you have two options, here, who are kind of focused, focused on doing this. I think we both have case studies on the website, which you can look at. But we'll go into some kind of broad stroke strategies for ranking on SearchGPT. And again, I think similar to what we've been, just to kind of address some of the questions we had on LinkedIn, this is similar to Perplexity. Like, I at this stage, for some customers, we're kind of going in deep in specific niche cases, like deep research for specific niche cases. But broadly, both myself and Joe have been helping sellers rank on Rufus for a year or so, and that is, of course, Amazon's large language model. And those principles are broadly compatible with SearchGPT, and they're broadly compatible with Perplexity and Gemini anywhere else. But so we'll kind of start on the first one. And the first one, I think, is content depth. So if you're a brand, you want to just have a clear amount, a large amount of content depth and relevance to the customer. So you want to be, and this is kind of similar to what we've been talking about Cosmo, on this podcast. You want to describe the use cases, the target audience, how they use it, the seasonality, all of this stuff. But you want to have that real content depth on your website in terms of blogs, and kind of, very semantically written copy, in order to, for the LLM, which is basically scraping your site, to kind of read all of that and get a kind of clear understanding what you do. So we should move to having not just focusing on like hitting keywords as you would do in and we've talked about this a lot, but hitting keywords as you would do for kind of stack ranking type searches, but actually having that semantic and like the intent of why someone would buy your product all kind of written out in detail.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just to add to this, and sort of like a layer further from my experience in terms of researching how these large language models are trained on. Obviously, what these large language models are trying to get to is a sort of the most likely, I would say, prediction of what a right answer would look like. And how do they get a lot of this data? They get it from looking at a lot of user-generated content. And so they get trained on the likes of Reddit, Quora, basically on like Google reviews, on Amazon reviews. They are ranking right now peer-generated content quite highly when it comes to deciding what to actually recommend when you are typing in something into the search bar, whether it's Perplexity or SearchGPT. And what is really interesting is you can look at how, like, historically, though the history is not very long, but historically, how companies like Google, like OpenAI, have interacted with the likes of Reddit. There has been such an aggressive bidding on getting the access to Reddit's like huge data pool of data. Well, why? Because this is it's a gold mine for these large language models to get trained on, and sort of adding more of that knowledge about the customer. And so in terms of very practical ways to what Max just said, I think a very practical way to like get this even more concrete is to either scrape or just like look at relevant Reddits and subreddits within your niche, your product, your topic, and just try to like mine this data and create content around that. And obviously a further strategy is get your brand out there in all of these subreddits and like in Quora and anything user generated. So I think it's really essential for people to start really getting very specific and very particular in terms of their context and their data points. And the best way to get this is from like sources like Reddit and sort of like user generated forums and so forth.
Yeah, and just to kind of continue on this point of user generated content, as you said, Google had this 60 million deal with Reddit. We all kind of experienced that brief period where Gemini was telling people to kind of put glue on pizza and eat a brick for breakfast and all these kind of weird things that came off Reddit, and they kind of tuned it down. But I think in this world where these kind of AI companies realize that more and more content is basically AI generated, and you have this risk of training a model on AI generated content and kind of creating this feedback loop. Reddit and Quora and these other places, it is largely human generated content. So there's definitely a huge weighting towards that. For the Perplexity fans, which I know there are many of, that you can search Perplexity, Reddit on Perplexity as one of the kind of drop downs. So yeah, I definitely agree with that that piece on kind of user generated content. And more broadly on this, also I'd add having the kind of the era of backlinks is kind of gone. Like we know that Google's initial breakthrough was kind of like ranking based on the traffic coming from backlinks. This isn't how a large language model works. However, like still having like mentions of your brand in PR is an important thing. So to give you just an anecdotal example, we had our we had our press release for our fundraise. We were covered in a bunch of kind of traditional media websites for that. And since then, we've kind of, anecdotally, we've seen quite a lot of people coming for us, and I say, how do you keep coming? And they go, oh yeah, ChatGPT recommended you. So I think there's definitely, well, we're doing all of these tips that we're talking about, but one of them, I think that having like PR and like reputable sources, talking about your brand, it's definitely an important one, an important signal for LLMs.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think this is actually hitting a really, really important point. When you think about optimizing for like from an SEO point of view for a large language model, I think it's really important to understand that it's not just about the depth, but also the spread of your content.
Yeah.
I think getting basically the large language models to like perceive the data about your brand from as wide as pool from like news sources or just like basically different touch points would have a more potent effect on like essentially how this large language model perceives you. And so what Max said is it's completely to the point. At the end of the day, large language models also want to like recommend legit brands. They want to make sure that there is like enough backing from all of their data points that this is indeed like a good recommendation, because as like large language models work, they work on sort of like prediction basis, and so it is all kind of about statistics as well. And so I think it not dissimilar to how Google like takes this information in terms of ranking, in terms of different sites, authority, and so forth. I think large language models would also take that in consideration. If your brand has been mentioned from many reputable news sources, that will certainly have a very strong impact on the likelihood of that large language model recommending your brand.
Yeah. So another one is the structure of your content. So, and this is again something we've been doing at eContent, is structuring content so you can basically give the LLM the snippet it needs. So you can kind of, in your product listings and your blogs and even in your website, kind of having like 1-2 line summaries in various places as you're writing the content, or like just overall sentences explaining, summarizing what you're trying to say, is very helpful, because you will see Gemini or SearchGPT literally taking that sentence clip and putting it in the so you can use tips here like bolding and italics, and like just kind of writing the content so you have that kind of one-liner coming across in multiple different aspects, but most importantly, like near the top of the page, so that you can kind of just be, you're helping yourself being clicked easily by the LLM, which, as we know, is are getting increasingly intelligent. So they'll be like, okay, there's the italic summary. I'm just going to like whack that into the answer and link it back to, your site. So that's a key one as well.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is again sort of SEO best practice, but like, clear sitemaps, schemas, metadata, all of these things still very much matter. I mean, let's face it, these large language models are not going to reinvent the wheel. In the end, Google has figured pretty good way to like find data and serve us the best results that will probably satisfy us. What ChatGPT and Perplexity are doing is taking probably a fairly well vetted list of sites for specific search terms and kind of adding more context, like analyzing the data, but they're not going to figure out a completely new like food chain in terms of decision making about good content, right? They will probably just streamline the content more, but I think the rules still apply in terms of standard SEO as well.
Definitely, you want to have that page speed and everything else so you're scrapable by the AI, because if you have a terrible website, that's going to be a challenge. So the last one on my side is the regular refresh and update of content. So you want to ensure that the you're putting out, AI wants to give fresh and relevant content. Google have said this themselves, but now it's going to become increasingly important just to make sure that things are up to date on your site, on your product listings, with trends and events are kind of integrated into there, so that when the user's coming, they're feeding relevant and interesting things back to that user. So again, that's an important one. Joe, any final kind of tips on your side?
No, I think it's really important just people to actually start actioning these. I think it's really nice to be in this sort of kind of like deer in the headlights zone of like, oh, it's all new, it's AI, I don't know what to do, but just start with at least one of those tips. And I think like actually number one is really straightforward. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of time. Like, you have AI at your fingertips. You can create content. You have all of this data you can use. Just start and like, test, experiment with SearchGPT. At the end, it's really important to understand that this is not going away. And, it's really essential that you start early with kind of your optimization strategy for these large language models.
Yeah, I mean the time is absolutely now. We're at the precipice. SearchGPT launched earlier this week, and it's only for the paid users. So it's only for the, obviously there's 200 million of them, but it's only for the people who care enough about AI. But it's the time is now to get yourself in ranking on these models and kind of establish a moat against competitor and be the kind of TripAdvisor of your industry. For the late 2020s.
Yes. Just like a little plug. There was also, I published in the AI for e-commerce newsletter a full-blown article about SearchGPT. So if you're interested in reading that and more about AI in e-commerce, subscribe to the newsletter.
Yeah, and a plug for me as well, because we never do plugs, which was very nice of us. We're very kind of giving value first, but you know, this is something that, you know, my co-founder and I and our team of AI researchers have been thinking about for 2 years. So if you're interested in kind of ranking on SearchGPT, Gemini, Rufus, you can find me on LinkedIn or wherever else. But Joe, this has been great. Nice, short and sweet episode, 25 minutes or so. And I think we'll be back tomorrow to talk to, you know, our standard format.
Oh, Max, I'm just getting tired of you. Come on, every day, really? No, it's a joke. I'm not ever tired of Max. Look at that sweet face.
Great. Well, hopefully the listeners aren't either. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow. Bye.